Welcome to the Young Film Academy. I'm just kidding. What if I did it in that voice? Welcome to the Young Film Academy podcast.
The podcast. We should do this. Let's do this like improv riffy one. Go on. Start it like that.
Welcome to the Young Film Academy podcast. The
podcast.
The essential podcast for teenagers.
So essential.
Looking to make their way into the creative industries.
So creative.
I'm Amelia Sciandra, here with Daniel Allen, award-winning filmmaker.
Design. I love that, whatever that was.
That's like my voice if I was going to do like a documentary about penguins. That's the voice I would use.
Speaking of penguins, have you seen that clip of Benedict Cumberbatch?
Oh yes, he can't say. He's like penguin.
Yeah, he's like penguins, and he just cannot say penguins. Google, anyone listening, pause this, or after the podcast, go and Google Benedict Cumberbatch penguins.
It's hilarious.
It's unbelievable how many times he says penguins incorrectly. There's a Graham Norton clip that I'd recommend where they show a clip of it, or they show like a montage of all the times.
It's very funny.
But very special. But completely unrelated to our guest for today, which is very exciting. I hope you're excited, Amelia.
I am super excited to talk to somebody with a job I've never heard of.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking to Richard Elson, who is a VFX production manager. We're going to find out a bit about what that is and what that entails. But Richard has also worked as a director, in edits and on post and filming as well, and also in documentaries. So loads of stuff. And he's worked on some incredible shows, including the Disney Plus show Nautilus, which we're going to touch on a little bit, and also Gangs of London and a bunch of other really cool projects. So without any further ado, welcome to the show, Richard. How's it going?
Great, thanks. Good to be with you again, and good to see you both in these different podcasting rooms. I mean, everyone listening can't see what I'm looking at, but it's been described as heaven and hell, with the kind of Dan with all sorts of light background and Amelia with a very dark background. So it's very interesting.
Absolutely, yeah. What Amelia is sort of in like a very professional recording booth, and I'm just in a very well lit room. So this is peeling back the curtain. Anyone that was under any illusion that we're generally sitting in the same room, that's now just been shattered. The kind of camaraderie that you hear on this show, you know, it's happening across the internet,
across the airwaves. And I'm recording from a small closet in my flat, so it's not. Don't think that it's somehow really high tech and lovely and comfortable.
And you're sort of under
podcasts.
Yeah, covered under the stairs, literally. Yes. But like the light is coming from underneath, which is just like traditional sort of horror writing.
Yes,
really.
I'm being lit like the devil because it's coming from up underneath. It's great.
Very dramatic. Even though, you know, this isn't Halloween anymore, Amelia. I know you love Halloween.
I love Halloween, but yeah, I need to give it up. We're moving on now to talk about something probably more exciting and interesting, which is what Richard does.
Absolutely. So, Richard, to start off with, you know, you've worn many hats in this industry, and I wondered if you could tell us about the different hats you have worn, and then we're going to go into sort of the hat you are currently wearing, as it were.
Sure, it's true. I've definitely done a lot of different things. I started off. What did I start off doing? I started off in the edit rooms. So that was back at university, and I started getting work experience, and I worked in light entertainment on things like So Graham Norton and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, all that kind of stuff. And I was assistant editor and in editing. Then I moved into editing for dramas, things like Poirot, Secret Diary of a Call Girl, kind of lots of TV drama stuff, and some films and commercials. And then alongside it, I got to do some camera work. So I was doing camera trainee on this Talking Dinosaur series for that's for Hallmark, Dinotopia, I think it was. Got some experience at the studios for that kind of thing. And then I moved into directing did some kids TV stuff, Am I High, and did a Christmas film, and then amongst that, I started moving into documentary. So I would do self-shooting and editing and directing for that, and I would do directing commercials and theatre, and then after all that, I've now found myself in visual effects land. So I'm, yes, it's definitely covered quite a wide range, I guess.
Yeah, and is that sort of just a general love of story that's sort of taken you on this journey, or is there sort of things you had in mind that you naturally were trying to sort of edge towards through this journey?
Yeah, it's definitely I mean, you're spot on with the love of story. That really is the core thing, and a creativity as well. Because I found that the creativity, it always bugged me when I was younger that people would talk about creativity and they'd like assume it only means painting pictures or something like that. It can be there in so many different things. It could be in how you work. It could be in every department, certainly in film and TV. And there's so many creative people around that you might not think of as the height of creativity, but they are learning new ways to record the sound. They are developing new techniques. They are using new ways to do makeup and so on. And obviously with the camera and the lighting and directing, I think people assume that, but there's so many other roles that are highly creative. So that always buzzes me, something new and trying to invent things. In terms of my goals, it was always to direct and to have that kind of overseeing voice on a production. And I wanted to build up and understand all the different departments. So that's why I started with editing, and then I got into camera purely because I would hear people talking about the lenses and I didn't really understand the lighting and I wanted to know it more. So I started self-shooting. Documentaries were brilliant for that because you had to suddenly come up with these new techniques and understand how to tell a story economically. And then the visual effects came about largely because, and I guess this is something that's probably quite useful for anyone to understand, is in terms of a career, you do get known for your last job and what you've done and so on. And because I'd veered off and I was doing documentaries, commercials, theatre, I'd stepped out of the sort of TV drama world, which is where I'd usually been in. And to come back into it, people didn't know me anymore as a director. So that's actually basically, it's probably, if I'm being blunt about it, it probably wasn't the best step. And looking back, I was like, okay, maybe I should have found a different way to pursue things that excited me, that didn't take me away completely. So that's why I then came back, because I got the opportunity to work back in post as visual effects. And again, it definitely pushes a lot of my buttons in terms of learning new things and trying to try new techniques. And there's so much going on at the moment. There's so many new techniques evolving. So I'm very excited about it in that way, but it is essentially a kind of sidestep to try and find my way back in.
Yeah, it's interesting that the industry itself, sees, is it specifically documentary or other different facets to like TV that people perceive to be very separate industries?
I think it varies on who's hiring, to be really honest. So I've noticed, because I remember going up for a one-off TV drama, and they quite liked the fact I'd done documentary because they were looking for that kind of style. But I do think people get wary, and I understand why they do, because if the budgets are very big on a lot of this stuff, so then they get wary and they're thinking, this person, let's say they've done detective TV drama. Well, I can hire them for detective TV drama. But if I've got a new urban, youthful exploration of gangs, then I don't want the detective TV drama person because they'll be too safe. I want the other person. So there is a lot of pigeonholing there. And I think it would be hard to stop that, because you can understand the thinking. If people see your track record, they see what you've done, then you're a safe bet for that. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes that is what you're best at and you can't really do too much more, sometimes there'll be people that be more adaptable. So I can understand why people make those decisions.
Yeah. Do you think that, because I was looking at your IMDb and, there's so much on there. There's so many different roles that you've done, which as someone from my background, I'm looking at that and going, this is amazing. He has done all of these different things, which to me would make you a very well-rounded candidate for pretty much anything. Because I would think, wow, he's dipped his toes in all of these different elements of the industry. Do you think that you've also had the experience, perhaps the more positive experience, where someone hiring sees that and goes, actually, that's why we want Richard? Or is it generally more of what you've just been speaking about and the kind of pigeonholing?
I think, again, it comes back to who's doing the hiring, because some people do see it. Generally, a kind of people I'd like to work with would tend to see that as a bonus. Because, again, for me, I remember listening to a podcast about creativity and success, and they did a science experiment. They took a group of medical students and they split them in half, and half of them spent one of their terms studying art, and the other half just carried on studying medicine. And the group that studied art came back and universally got better grades and were more better thinking, because they started putting together other techniques into the medicine.
Yes.
So they started understanding, okay, this is how we scrutinize a painting, this is how we look at this, and they started using that in their techniques about surgery and what you look for in surgery and so on. So I think that kind of idea of bringing different skill sets and bringing a new voice to what you already do is brilliant, but not everyone sees it like that.
Right.
And I think that's because, again, I think maybe people don't feel confident in exactly what they do. So when they're hiring, they want the safe thing. But certainly for me, I really appreciate it and love all the different jobs that I've done, because it does bring that different experience, which is exciting personally, and also I like to think helps me as any kind of filmmaker. But I also see that there is still that pigeonhole thing, and it's not necessarily the best thing for the career, I think.
Yeah, it's the same sort of typecasting that I suppose that actors like Amelia, will know all about all the time. You get seen to be that role. I think there's this perception that doesn't apply to people that are behind the camera, but it absolutely does, and can sort of affect you. But I think it's amazing that you've still managed to sort of go from like these different areas, and that you haven't allowed that to sort of hold you back in a way, which is super cool. And obviously it's led you to your current job, which is VFX production managing, which, for those that don't work in visual effects or don't really know loads about visual effects, sounds like maybe a mouthful. And I wondered if you could sort of give us an idea of what a VFX production manager does. What do your days look like?
Sure. And again, I'm probably different to other visual effects production managers, purely I think because of the experience I come out. But in a nutshell, I mean, we can break it down, and without sounding kind of facetious, then it's managing the production of the visual effects, kind of like. So you can think in those terms. You go, okay, managing. So that's managing a team. That's managing the kind of processes in it and that kind of thing. And then it's the production side of it, rather than the actual artistic side of it. I'm not painting, I'm not doing the visual effects, I'm not on the computer doing those. I'm about the production of it. So that's coordinating together all the different vendors, which is what we call the companies who do the actual visual effects shots, liaising with the editorial team who are in the post-production side, and with the producers and so on, to basically get all these visual effects shots in, and to the high quality and that the show needs, and keeping it running smoothly. And there's the visual effects department has expanded hugely in the last, I'd say, I don't know, like 10, 20 years. I did, for instance, it was about 20 years ago, I was visual effects editor on a film called Sleuth. It was the remake of the Michael Caine, Laurence Olivier one. And on that, we had it was such a different role. It was not so big. It was just me. It was the visual effects department from the production side, and then we had visual effects artists. But we just had one company that we used, and we would do things like we would paint out a Kit Kat stain of chocolate on Michael Caine's lip. And, things like that. They were hidden visual effects you wouldn't really know about. And then it's evolved so much that the capability is out there now that you can do this incredible stuff. And so the show I'm working on at the moment, it's a fantasy setting, and there are just so many visual effects because that's what it requires. And there's so many other shows like this. Again, we're used to seeing fantasy. There's major fantasy TV series out there at the moment of say Rings of Power and House of the Dragon and so on. So that obviously when the more you get the visual effects side of it expanding, you need a bigger team. And I probably the easiest way to describe it is that if people understand a shoot side of it more, so they understand getting together a set, actors, the crew to shoot it and so on, and just picture that you've got to do that but all in a virtual setting. You've got to do that in the computers, so your actors become the models that they create. The lighting is the lighting you apply to that. You've got to bring together so many different shots, so my role is to basically manage that.
I see. So keeping that sort of overall control and making sure that all those pieces are in play and going well, ready for a deadline, I suppose. Like you have deadline, whereas a shoot like on set has a finite number of days. You also have a finite number of days. But when things happen, I imagine maybe. Do they shuffle around a little bit more because you're more aiming for a deadline? It's not like you have to be in one location for 2 days and then you have to move out. So do things overrun and then you have to then keep remanaging, I suppose? Yeah,
it's a big challenge in the industry at the moment because so the way it used to be, well, actually one thing I would say straight away is that the cost of the shoot is still much more expensive, but the cost in post is still considerable, particularly when you get to a certain phase of it. So I don't know how much all the listeners would be aware of the different parts of post, but you start off with what's called an offline edit, and that's when essentially you could boil that down to one computer with your director, your editor, working away, and that's fairly cheap. That's two people, a computer, and a room. So that's not that involved. And obviously, you then involve the producers and the executive producers. You get all the notes, you do that stuff. So that's quite a flexible thing, really. Then you get into the real post-production side of it, which is where you do the color grading, you get the music in, you do the sound mix, and with that, then that's with much more specialized equipment and specialized people doing it. The cost goes up a lot for that. So in terms of deadlines, that's your equivalent of the shoot. It's still not as expensive as the shoot. It's not as expensive as a day on a big studio with all the people, but it is expensive. And so that's what we have to hit. Those are the deadlines that can't change. And actually, the ultimate deadline is the TX, the transmission date. So that's the end thing. But within it, as equipment gets better and as software gets better, then there's more flexibility. Then people take advantage of that flexibility. So what used to happen is editor, director, producers, we all work through, we get the story to where we like, brilliant. We lock it, we say we're not going to touch it, and then all the stuff happens, all the visual effects, everything else. But now people want to see everything in it. We want to see the sounds. We want to see some temporary music in it. And now the visual effects are getting easier to do at a sort of rough level. So people want to see the visual effects in it. So then then the lines blur, and then you don't get that lock. And I would say literally in the last 2 or 3 years, it's changed from a point where you lock an episode and then you turn it over for visual effects to now we don't do that. We work visual effects in. And what makes the job hard there is that you're trying to get visual effects done to a high standard with all these vendors. You're trying to get it into an edit, and then the next day that edit might all change.
Oh gosh.
And then you've got to work out, okay, how much did we spend on that visual effects? How much did we spend on that one? What do we need to keep in? We then negotiate with the editor director and we say, okay, this actually cost us £20,000, that shot. So maybe can we keep that in, and can you change the edit a bit? And so there's all that discussion goes on. So it then means you need a bigger team. And I mean, for what we do, we've now developed coding skills, because we've realized that there is so much admin taken up with all of this, and sometimes it's just not possible, or it's a waste of time to get people to do it when you think a computer can do it. So part of the job spec has now been that I look for people on the team who can code, and we bring them in.
Is that coding within the VFX programs, like scripts for simulations and stuff like that? Or is this coding to manage like the back end or the administration side of it?
That's purely coding for the administration side. So obviously the vendors, they're then developing, they do code themselves. And I mean, I'm sure if anyone's watched any kind of how to films on YouTube or something about how they do visual effects, I mean, it's already incredible what they do now compared to what you could do 20 years ago, in terms of, you make something and then you say, right, okay, the hair behaves in this way, the light behaves in this way, I put the waterfall there, I know the effect of that on the foreground and the background. It's so, there's obviously a huge amount of coding goes into there, but for us, because the challenge was that kind of administrative and communication challenge, then it comes down to things that are, more universal.
Yeah. At what stage on a production like this? So for those that don't know, the show is Nautilus, right? We can say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is
public domain. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's a Disney Plus show, which is very exciting, about Captain Nemo's journey.
Yes,
escapades
that's
at
his
sea.
ship, the Nautilus, right?
Yeah. So a big scale show with obviously lots of VFX and stuff. So I wondered, like, at what stage you and your team are brought on board.
And again, this always varies. I'd always say the earlier the better, because quite often you think you don't need people, and no one wants to think, oh, we've hired a bunch of people and they're just sitting around twiddling their thumbs. But generally what happens is you want to get the whole kind of system up and running, and it's always bespoke for every show, because there's just different ways of working with things, and they all have their different challenges. You want to get that system up and running first, so that when stuff comes in, everyone knows what they're doing. They come on board the show. When you then bring on the visual effects artists, they're falling into it, and they're not confused by the workflow. They're not being shown different ways of working, and it keeps changing and so on. So you do want a team of people at the beginning that can do tests, that can work through stuff, and then get it all uniform, so it cuts down confusion and saves time. Generally, you want people on, really at the start of the shoot. But that's our side of it, because obviously the visual effects on a show like this, they've been started way before, because the plans for it. People like the visual effects supervisor become incredibly important. They are, they have so much influence and so much responsibility for the look of the show, because, and again, it goes back to the set thing, is you don't turn up on set with your DP just straight off. They've spent ages planning it, thinking about the look, with all the team, and so the visual effect department as a whole comes on a lot earlier. But for the part that I'm doing, just when the shoot starts, and even sometimes we get brought on a bit later. You always find if you do come on later, then there's a few challenges, and it is a bit of a false economy.
Just thinking about, the positions we sort of know about, right? I'd never heard of a visual effects product manager. What is it? Sorry, program manager. Production manager. Goodness, all of these P's. But I've heard of a visual effects supervisor. And so I was just wondering, what is your relationship to that person? Right.
Yeah. So the visual effects supervisor is the main one, the main creative drive of the visual effects department. You could almost think of them, I don't know, it's probably fair to say maybe the kind of equivalent of the director or the director of photography, but within visual effects.
Right.
And that's why you see them, Marvel film credits come up and you're going to see visual effects supervisor, nice and big single card credit. They have to plan the visual effects with the director. So they'll be saying, okay, how do we achieve the story at this point and how the look of it and what do we do? And they're then on set and that's really key because they need to make sure they've got the vision for it and then know how to achieve it on the set with the different, film those different elements because you're not going to go back to set. I mean, obviously we can do pickups and reshoots and stuff, but it's really not ideal and
Right.
you can't do it later in the time. So they've got a lot of weight on their shoulders there. And then when it moves into more of the post end, then they're the ones talking directly to the visual effects artists and they're saying, okay, right, I need the light to change over there. I need to have the reflection on them heavier. I've had some amazing notes back. Sometimes people get so detailed. My favorite note ever was on a series a couple of years ago, and the note was, "Can we make the grass less bouncy?" I thought, wow, we control the blades of grass and stuff.
That's incredible.
And it was
it bouncy grass, Richard? It was really bouncy?
It turns out that it was because when an actor lands on that patch of grass, there was cushioning underneath it to protect them, and so it made it less of an impact. So they wanted the grass to be less bouncy, so you felt the fall more, and you just realise that kind of level of detail.
Wow!
But yeah, so the visual effects supervisor is the one that's kind of the creative lead overall, and then my role would be basically facilitating their vision.
So are they your main liaison, the VFX supervisor? Is that who you're dealing with from Disney side? Because obviously, so your company's working on a series of these visual effects shots, as you mentioned earlier, there's other companies also working on visual effects shots for the same production. So is your go-to to the show the VFX supervisor, or do you also speak directly with the director, or are the lines a bit blurred in terms of who you're speaking with mostly?
We're actually we're more with the editorial department, so I'm not with the specific visual effects company. We're basically overseeing all the visual effects companies. So we sit in between. So we're kind of in between the visual effects companies, editorial, the directors, the producers, and the visual effects supervisor, and the visual effects producers, and so on. So basically, in terms of the producers, we liaise with them a lot to make sure that we're keeping on schedule, and money and budget. So that's that side of things. With editorial and the directors, it's making that the directors and editorial get their kind of their vision and their story across. With the visual effects supervisor, it's about what their plans are, how they're facilitating it, what we need to get vendors, and then with the vendors, it's just taking over the any notes, any briefs about the shots, and also the technical side, because the technical side is huge. You need to make sure with lots of different people working the same thing, they're all working, their work all comes out back and matches exactly, because it needs to be seamless. It can't look like, you can't look through the end product and think, oh, well, hang on, the tree looks different in that shot to the other shot, and so on.
Yeah, so
I see. Wow, so you're gluing that all together. That's so
yeah, that's
cool.
what I was just about to say. What I'm really conscious of is when you watch like a Marvel film, for example, and I guess what you're saying as vendors is these are all these different VFX companies that have worked on the film. And for a Marvel film, sometimes there's like tons of them. There's so many different vendors. I mean, how many different, I'm just thinking about your role. It's like a hugely communicative role and a huge kind of people management role. And you have, to use a very corporate word, so many stakeholders to whom you're responsible and that you're dealing with. But I'm just thinking, like, how many vendors, like on the show that you're currently working on, how many different VFX vendors would you be working with across an episode or the series?
I'll talk about another show with how many we use, purely because again we're still live with
Yes.
the show we're on at the moment.
Yes.
Things change, and I don't really want to discuss that just because again we until something's all finished. But on the previous show I worked on, so that was a Sky TV thing called Gangs of London, and
I love Gangs of London.
Do you? Okay, right.
Yeah, I do. I'm a big fan of the director because he did like The Raid and The Raid 2. So I love the sort of the ultra violence martial arts and stuff. I'm just watching season 2 at the moment, so no spoilers.
Yes, well, I won't give any spoilers for that. So I was on series 1 and series 2. Gareth was on series 1, and the lead director for series 2 was Corin Hardy, who actually did a lot of episodes in series 1 as well. So it's got a different vibe to it as well this time. But essentially, we ended up with about 13 companies on that. So again, it's another heavy visual effects.
Wow.
So it may not be a fantasy setting. Well, actually, I suppose it is a fantasy setting because it's not like trying to say this is documentary London. This is a sort of this is a very style.
It's very fantastical, isn't it?
Yeah, it's real sort of larger than life kind of real vision of different gangs operating in London. And yes, we had 13 vendors on that. And across the world, I always said I would love to do a tour of these shows of the visual effects companies we work with, because we were with people from Indonesia, Nepal, Australia, Scotland, Canada, India,
Wow.
and the UK. I think France as well at one point. So it's just this brilliant breadth of people, and it's that amazing thing of that we can all work globally, and so you got people literally from all over the world working on it.
So were you guys using Zoom before everyone knew what Zoom was, or?
Exactly. That's no, we were. I mean, I think that's opened us up, because I should say that when I first got back into visual effects, it was on the first series of Gangs, and that was only about 3 years ago. So it was
Sure.
That was literally the first series as it was coming to an end. That's when the pandemic came. So that's when we all started using Zoom for that. Remote working was definitely a thing, more so, but we just didn't have Zooms with the vendors in the other countries so much. We did phone calls, I guess, and Skype. Skype's been around, that kind of thing. But I'm probably not best placed to talk about it because I wasn't doing it so heavily beforehand. So other people might have been using it more. I'm not too sure. Definitely, as far as we're concerned, then it's ramped everyone up a lot. And there's interesting new things that we've got to consider, is as well as the ability to actually communicate and work together remotely, you need to take into account the security of that. So before, if you had everyone in one building and they just go and talk to people in another building, you can look after that more securely. When it becomes all cloud-based, when it becomes all going online, then there's strict, protocols you've got to put in. So for instance, anyone doing the actual visual effects work and the people editing this show, none of those computers are online. You do the work and then you take it to a separate computer that then can be online and has all sorts of firewalls and security, because you just got to be so careful, especially on bigger shows when there's interest in it. Then that people would want to see the leaks, and so you need to be ultra careful of that.
Of course, yeah. So I just wanted to backtrack a little bit. You mentioned the different directors on Gangs of London and sort of having their own influence and stuff. Obviously, the Nautilus has 3 different directors. You got Michael Matthews, Ben C. Lucas, and Isabel Saib. And I wondered, do you feel the different directors' influence on the different episodes that you're working on, or does it all get scrambled up and you're sort of not sure what's well, I assume you do know which episodes different shots are intended for, but yeah, I wondered if you could talk about that.
Definitely, you always get that kind of the different directors' vision, their different style of working as well. So we'd see it in 2 ways. You'd see it in the kind of behind the camera stuff of how they work and how they achieve that, and then you do also see it in the end result. But again, it's probably best if I'll talk about Gangs again for that, purely because the show's not out and we haven't seen it all finished yet.
Of course,
right.
Yeah.
So there's kind of two things that play there. Like on the one hand, the show needs to have an overall feel, because it can't. You don't want something to suddenly jump out and really be different to the rest of it. But then within that, you want the leeway for people to be able to express their voice and so on. So that's why you might have seen the term showrunners, and there's quite often a showrunner who has the overall style of the show to consider. And so on Gangs of London, for instance, there would be, everyone has their different style, their different backgrounds, what they bring to it, but they all fit within the Gangs of London style, which is overseen by either a showrunner or the executive producers or the over series producer or the lead director. And so there is definitely a sort of, in fact, on Gangs, you can compare it with series 1 to series 2 because, so for instance, he's come from a horror background, so he's sort of brought more of an injection of that kind of horror feeling to some of the scenes, and Gareth had more the kind of, as you said, the martial arts action style. So you can see those come across, and even though the story's the same, you might have exactly the same sequence in the script, but you would see those different approaches coming through. And that's where you realise how important pre-production is, because that would be a case of the director talking to all the crew beforehand, including the actors, and they'd be saying, right, okay, for this, it's all about this kind of style. This is the tone of it. We want people to feel fear. We want people to feel adrenaline, whatever it is. And that's where you see. So you definitely do see that kind of influence from the director onto each episode.
And then when it gets to you, when you come into that process, do you feel the influence? How do you feel in the kind of, in that more post-production area, the influence of those different directors? How does that impact the way you work?
It varies because for us, it's a practical consideration. There's the quality needs to be top notch across the board, and as we said, it needs to fit the vision of the show. So that's kind of, and they always do. It's like the directors. They're always they're top of their game, all the ones working on these kind of shows. But in terms of the practical considerations, it's similar again to how people are on set. If you listen to actors talking to different directors, you'll get some directors that want to do it in one take. Some directors will rehearse a lot and then just do 1 or 2 takes. Some directors want to do loads and loads of takes. Some people want to improvise a bit. And you do get similar things in visual effects world, in post world. So you might get someone who says, right, I've got this exactly envisioned. I know exactly what I want to do. I want it to be like this. I want it to stick like that. And sometimes we would have people film it roughly with a kind of low rent camera. And Gareth, for series 1 of Gangs, for instance, he would film things. He had a warehouse for the cardboard boxes marked out exactly as the sets would be, and he would just experiment with the stunt performers, film it all, then put that film together and then mimic that on set. So he would have already planned out all the different moves. But then other directors would go, okay, right, we want to set something up, and then when we're there for real with all the actors together, with all the set and with all the lighting on it, and see what happens on the day, then they might want to improvise more. And that's the same in the post world, because they might say, right, okay, can you just give me a broad brushstroke of it, and then let's see how it fits in the edit. And then they might say, oh, okay, let's change that and take that. And that can change depending on the director. It doesn't change quite. There's certain limits always because of money. So, you can't say to someone, we've got all the time in the world, you can do a real rough thing. And you can't say to the visual effects companies, right, can you just recreate all of this stuff and then I'll change it from left to right. There's limits, but there's still different styles that at play. One of the things that we did on Gangs, which is a recent bit of tech, is the volume shooting, which was used on The Mandalorian and so on.
Oh wow!
They used
was that on season 1, or was that also season 2 of Gang?
Series 2 of Gang. So, and that's the reason they used it in The Mandalorian, because they had the reflective armor suit. So you can't. Additional blue screen things couldn't be used because you need to do so much work on the reflections. But the other thing it can give is this flexibility. So on Gang, because basically for anyone who doesn't know what the volume is, then you've basically got huge LED screens, and they can create anything you like. You could do just one wall behind you. You could do an entire 360 round people, and you have screens above you as well. So the images, you create images to play as the background all around the actors. And then you get more flexibility because you can start moving the camera about and you can look at it and say, actually, do you know what? I want to go in close. I want to come from this angle. I want to change it. And certainly on gangs, you've still got to plan it very well because you need to make sure you've got what goes in that background. And if you don't have it, then you're wasting time on set. So it's got to be very planned in great detail, but you can allow for more flexibility because, I mean, we had this stuff in series 2 of Gangs, and there's one of the episodes has quite a lot in the cars, and so, but the director didn't want it to be just a kind of the usual. Here's 2 people talking in a car. We have a 2 shot of them and then 2 close-ups. They wanted to have more exciting kind of movement. So we got a huge turntable that was synced up to a curved screen behind it, and so whenever the car was rotated on the turntable, the background would move in sync with it. And then you could get a technocrane to come in and move and do moves around it separately to how that was moving. So you could get these incredible moves that would start through the back windscreen. They would come all the way around, go in through windows, come back out again. And
wow,
you wouldn't have been able to do that with a different way of shooting it. And it gets all the stuff you wouldn't be able to plan so well with blue screen. I mean, you could do it, but it's just so detailed. Those, the way the world lights us and all the different bits of dust that might fall around, to do
ended up replacing the car in CGI, right? Just to get the reflections
it's
right.
Huge. And it's one of those things that's all possible, but it's just the money. If you think, right, you want to get a team of people and you say, I want you to mimic every single reflection on the car. There's loads. When you look at a car, there's loads of bits. There's the light is bouncing off it. There's the people and so on. So it was a brilliant tool for that. We loved the studio shoot for that.
So for those that are sort of listening and being like, this sounds amazing. I mean, I'm maybe also have the bonus excitement because you're talking about Gangs of London. But for those that are also being like, this sounds so cool, what would you advise? Like, how could people try and gear themselves towards being maybe a VFX production manager or sort of entering that world of making visual effects happen?
Sure. So I guess it combines. You definitely need a strong post understanding. And then you also want that for this particular role, you also need the production stroke managing side of it. So you tend to get, people might be visual effects production coordinators. They might start off as, they might start in the more technical side. So they might start as like an assistant visual effects editor. Or they might have come from the production side. And again, I mean, if I think to where we recruited some of our team from, then some of them we have like a visual effects production. What do we have? What are they called? Visual effects administrator, visual effects production coordinator, and visual effects production manager. So those roles that lead up to it. The visual effects administrator, the person we've got actually is doing much more advanced stuff than we would initially require, and it's fantastic because they're
cheaper as well.
It's that they're doing this incredible coding to work out to link it through, and certainly I'm a big believer in the value of everyone at every stage of their role, because I think thank God we're not in some of the old eras where people just say, know your place and you do this and you can only do that.
Yeah.
You are only valuable for that, because everyone brings something to it. And I always enjoy it. Make it very clear to the team is like, whatever their position is, I hate it when people say, I'm just. I hate it when people say, I'm just the assistant, whatever. I was like, you are not just the assistant. You are the assistant, whatever. And you have a very important role to play. And they are doing that job more than you. It's the same as when you're a director and you want the best DP, the best actors, the best writers, the best everything else, because they're going to advise you. And I don't need to be better than them at their job because they're doing their job. And then it's the same thing. You want people that can bring things to the role. So I suppose we got people that come straight out of doing a master's to go do in, for instance, the assistant visual effects editor and the visual effects administrator. And that was brilliant because they had this acute understanding of filmmaking from all sorts of different sides. The visual effects administrator hadn't worked in visual effects before. In fact, neither of them had when I first hired them, because the visual effects assistant editor worked with on a previous shows. But they needed, for the production side of it, you knew they needed organization, they needed an understanding of post, they needed, and more than anything else, I think you need a kind of curious intellect and a sort of desire to learn and be precise. Because, and again, it's another thing that I'd always encourage in the team, is that I don't mind if we're all going to make mistakes, but I want someone to own up to the mistake, say they've done it and learn from it, rather than trying to cover it up for it and say that. For instance, one of the people I hired on a job, in the interview, he came out and said, we asked a certain question, and he said, look, I don't know that. That's beyond my limit. And he said, he said it at the end of the interview, he said, I just want to be honest. Like, certain things you've said, I've not got experience in doing those, and I don't know this, but I'd love to learn. And that's one of the things we hired him for, because we said, well, this guy's, when he's with our team, he wants to learn. We can teach him and bring him up to speed. And then when he is, we trust that he's going to do the job. And if he doesn't know what he's doing, he's going to ask. And if he does make a mistake, he's going to admit it. And you can fix that, because then you have this kind of culture of learning as opposed to a culture of blame. But yeah, so it's probably a long-winded answer, but basically it's the skill set you need to start off, and it's that organization and understanding of the technical you'd need.
No, absolutely. I think those kind of like skills and sort of understanding I wonder actually what the masters were that some of these students or ex-students, what did they study that maybe got them into this? Was it coding stuff, or was it film?
Film. So one of the visual effects administrator studied did a master's in producing, and it's the kind of thing that you assume someone who's already worked at a high level in producing on in kind of shorts and a sort of that kind of level, you presume they will be able to kind of move up quite quickly, because they need a bit of experience. They need to be road tested. People see them in the industry, and then know anyone who sees them working is going to go, okay, this person can do more and more. And then the person from the sort of assistant visual effects editor, then it was that they actually did a master's in directing, but they had used Avid a lot. They'd done editing before. They knew the cameras, so they were brilliantly technically minded as well, and they could sort of fit straight into that.
Yeah, were they at like NFTS, or were they at different universities in the UK?
Met Film.
Okay, gotcha.
So, yeah. But I mean, I should stress as well, because I'm, just homed in on people coming from doing a master's, but there are other people as well. And one of the things that that we've, tried to do is get a good diverse team. And it's not just because it's, because it's something that we've, I think, kind of morally as the industry, we've realized there was lacking in. So that morally said, okay, we need to address this. But in terms of how you work, there's proven studies again that show that this is the best way to be. There was a study where they took a group of people and they asked them to solve a murder mystery game. And there were 3 suspects, and they got these people and they said, you're going to need to tell us who you think the murderer is, having seen all the evidence. They split them into 2 groups of people. One half were just with friends, and the other half had 3 friends and a stranger, because they decided that was the most awkward combination, because if you have 2 pairs, you kind of chat. If no one knows each other, there's nothing there, and there's no hang-ups. So that was the most awkward combination. And the ones who came out with that awkward combination, they came out saying, oh, okay, we didn't enjoy it, we don't think we did very well, and so on. And the ones who came out with all the friends said we had a great time and we did brilliantly. But actually, the ones who were split into the awkward pairing, they got it right about 75% of the time. And the ones who didn't, they got it right about 40% or 45% of the time.
Yeah.
It really showed that those different voices working together really, made a difference. And also, I always think with that one, if you think about it, if you just guessed, you're going to get it right 33% of the time. So it just shows how
Yeah.
how little it was there. But it just going back to that thing of like which university people come from, then I definitely look for people from different backgrounds with different voices, purely because I know that's going to aid. One, it's the right thing to do because you want that equality of opportunity, but also because it will aid the production, and so it's not like we always look for the one set university or the one area or type of people, and we'll do searches, we'll look into Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups, we'll put posts up, we're doing social media, you scour some universities and so on. So yeah, we do sort of look, but I suppose that it's also worth noting that there are a few places that people do know because of your time limit. You can't do the most extensive search, so you kind of have to put yourself in the line of sight of people looking for those. And within our industry, then it becomes, the universities are one thing. Agents, obviously, when you get to a certain level, then you've got your agents, and then certain groups like there's things like and even Mandy and shooting people and stuff. And we didn't recruit anyone from there this time, but I've looked there before.
I've got a question
No, that's a great shout.
that kind of relates to what you're talking about, and is something that I think is really important that we try to help our young people understand on our courses, which is it's so evident from everything that you've said, especially in a role like yours, how important collaboration is. And of course, I think everybody knows to a certain extent filmmaking is a collaborative endeavor. But then when you think about films, you're often saying it's a one-person film, right? It's a Scorsese film. It's we know the names of directors, but we don't know the names of visual effects production managers, as perhaps we should. And so I guess I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about, I was listening to you, describe those qualities that somebody needed to join your team. And I was thinking, being able to collaborate is maybe a given, but it's a huge element of kind of what can make someone successful in this industry. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about collaboration and how that impacts the work that you do.
Yeah, sure. There's probably the most relevant anecdote I can think was actually from a film I did that I directed. And so on that, there was myself and the DP, and I try not to be too specific, but it's a story with a good ending, so I'm not bad-mouthing people. But we had the start of the very first day of shoot. Actually, no, it turned out to be the second day. The first day we planned for the shoot was with a crowd scene with 13,000 extras, and we had loads of cameras. It was a huge deal. We had such a short window when we needed to get this because it was getting these people together. All that production side of it was huge, and we were really dropped in the deep end. I'd been having troubles with the DP on the build up through the pre-production. We just worked in different styles. He had come from the kind of the proper Hollywood, worked on The Abyss, worked on all these sort of huge budget Hollywood stuff. He was very much used to the kind of the bravado, the sort of the shouting, that kind of thing, and I wasn't. That's not my style. And we clashed. We had some kind of difficulties in pre-production, nothing too much. But then when the first day of the shoot came, it was difficult. And so the next day, then I met up with him. We actually, went and had a drive in his car, went to the laundrette, all this kind of stuff because we were working away from home, and we had a chat. And I said, look, we've got however many more weeks on this. This isn't going to work. I can't be doing that. And I had a problem with how he was talking to the crew and how we were communicating and airing our differences. And what was brilliant was he just said, "Sorry, I didn't realize it was coming across that way." He explained his way of thinking. He explained where he was coming from, and he explained why he was talking in that way. And I said, why I wanted to work in a certain way. We talked it all through, and then we had a brilliant time for the rest of the shoot. And I've never known such a change and it was just because of that conversation we had, both tackling the differences head on and saying, look, we want to make this work together. We're on the same side. What can we do? Came together and really resolved that. And interestingly, on the same film, there was someone who, there was a similar clash, and I kept on saying, right, okay, you got to talk to this person, you got to do it. And they never really got around to, they just didn't. And it always was there. There was always that kind of clash, which was a shame because, you could see people, we've all got different sides to us and so on. So in terms of collaboration, I think having difficult conversations before they could become more difficult is really important. I think there's a really interesting graph, and it's literally a diagonal line, and it says the start of a project to the end of a project, and then it has kind of money, and it says you work it out your problems at the end of the project, it's going to cost you that much. I don't know how to do this on a podcast.
Yeah.
Imagine a diagonal line going upwards. You sort it all out at the beginning, it doesn't cost you much. You sort it all out, it's fine. You sort it out at the end, it's going to cost you a lot more.
Yeah, I think that applies to life as well, doesn't it? In all sort of aspects.
Well, and I think what I hear you saying there, which I think is super important, is just transparency, right? To make collaboration work, you need to be able to have those kind of transparent, honest, and yes, probably difficult, perhaps awkward conversations, but that is what can make the collaboration so much richer. And as you have just demonstrated with that story, successful, for the two of you to work together and also fun. I mean, if you were going to have that difficult relationship with him through the whole shoot, that wouldn't be a good memory for you, right? It would have been, not very enjoyable. So I think that's an important thing to highlight as well for our young listeners, is that you want it, it's work, but if you want it to be enjoyable, you've also got to be willing to kind of have those hard conversations.
Yeah, I think you also need an openness, because if everyone's feeling constrained, if there are those difficulties, it cuts down on creativity, because you're sort of judging yourself before you even say something, because you're aware there's a difficulty, you're aware you've got to have some kind of combat about it. And it's much better if you're then having, difficult conversations, but fruitful conversations, as opposed to feeling oppressive. And again, that's another thing that I see it changing in a positive way all across the industry. And there's so much more consideration about a kind of emotional intelligence nowadays than there used to be, kind of decades ago.
100%. Richard, just one last double barrel question for you. So firstly was, what were you up to in your teenage years that set you up for what you do now? And secondly, what advice would you give to that teenage version of yourself?
Oh, wow, okay. So in my teenage years, I was just always making some kind of art. I guess I'd say art. I don't know whether it was drawing. It was
nice.
Drawing, making little games. It was I then got into computer. Me and my brother, I remember we made little computer games and sold them to computer magazines. We did I would do art, and I would get them put on t-shirts and things, and then as soon as I understood sort of stories, I was writing stories, and it was just constantly chucking stuff out. I think I always feel like I didn't talk a lot as a kid, and I was just desperate to talk in whatever way possible, so it came out in any other way than actually talking, I suppose, and then the talking came later. But so that's what I was doing as a. But actually, sorry, you said teenage. I was thinking earlier. So teenage. By that point, I was then making films. I was doing stuff. I would grab an old family camera that I found, and make things on that, and they were terrible films, but just anything to sort of try and get your heads around it. And then I remember, by the time I was 18, I remember seeing a local furniture salesman had started making films, historical films, and my mum actually came back and she had seen one of these, and she showed me that she bought the video, and I watched it. I was like, oh god, that looks awful. And then she said the budget of it, and I was like, what? They had loads of money? And so I literally packed together all these drawings, everything I've been doing. And I drove straight round to this furniture shop. And I said, "Are you doing another one? Because we do it good. You've got and here's the stuff, and here's someone, you can combine these things." And we did a couple of films together. And they were by no means great again, because I was still young and stuff, but they kind of, they helped and stuff. So it was just.
Are they online? Can we find them?
God, no. I don't suppose they are, because this is so long ago, and it was on VHS, and that's how they got distributed. Maybe I've got them on a file somewhere. I'm not too sure, but they're really not made their way online. Luckily,
we can put them on the YFA YouTube.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you find them, send them over. We'll be glad to put them out there.
I'm sure James is a digitizer.
And then in terms of the advice, I think I'd give a couple of different pieces of advice. One, I would say be brave. I think that is the most important one, because you want to allow for the fact that you're going to fail. It's, again, goes back to that graph. Fail dead earlier on, and you will reap the rewards, because you learn from those mistakes, and the stakes aren't so high at the beginning. But then I would also, I think, something about, because there's one key thing for me, and this happened a bit later on, but I struggled with the kind of diplomacy and the kind of politics of the film industry, which I think would probably be the same in any industry. And it goes back to that communication thing, because I saw it in such a tunnel vision. As the creator of things, you spend so long making stuff, you've got your ideas about it, you know exactly what it needs to look like and the focus of it, and you know how to achieve it, and you just kind of want other people to fall in with it. And then I would clash with people when I came to a higher level professionally, and I would have these really frustrating conversations where, even to the point where at one point when I was a director, a producer said to me something like, "I know you're right, but I'm the producer, so we're going to do it this way." And that was really hard to hear, because you're thinking, well, hang on, you just admitted I'm right. Why can't we do it that way? But for my part, the thing I did wrong with that was that I still just saw it as a kind of one person versus another person, as opposed to trying to get the best result all round for everyone to feel good about it. So even if you might be right with something, you might be the one with the vision that's absolutely dead on and knows, and you've got the right vision. But if you communicate that in a way that makes it seem very confrontational and like, I'm right, you're wrong, the other person gets defensive, it doesn't work. Whereas if you can explain what you need, and you can work with people in a better way, that is, more difficult sometimes, but ultimately, means you come together, then everyone wins, including the production, and your career, because, you don't want to get on the wrong side of people who are going to hire you in the future. So that was the two things. I would give myself two pieces of advice. One, be brave, and two, think of the other person, and don't think of it like a zero-sum game.
Richard, that's amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a real treat to peel back the curtain on some exciting shows and being at the heart of sort of modern digital storytelling. So thank you
so much.
Brilliant. Thank you. Really fun. Thanks, guys.
That was super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. Big thanks to Richard for coming to chat with us. I learned quite a lot, so I hope our listeners did too.
Yeah, I mean, I literally learned so much. Like, understanding. So I thought the production manager maybe operated on behalf of like one visual effects company, but learning that they're literally, I think as you put it, Amelia, in the show, like being the hub, right?
Yeah, they're like the hub
in the middle of a wheel.
And all the spokes kind of feed into him, and he has all of these different, the director, the VFX supervisor, the producers, and then all of those different vendors. Yeah, I was the same. I thought that he worked for a VFX company, but actually it's quite different. It's a hugely coordination based role.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And what's always beautiful, like as we explore these kinds of roles within film and television, is what always comes up, which I think is very understandable, is those soft skills.
Absolutely.
Is those, how do you communicate? How are you going to manage conflict? How are you going to get your point across? How are you just going to be a good human, I suppose?
Yes, I was really glad to hear Richard say the term emotional intelligence, because, they're just showing, research is showing over and over again that is just key to making business relationships work. And, this is a business as much as it is anything, as much as it is a creative industry, there's still business elements to it. And you really need to be able to have that emotional intelligence to navigate all of those different relationships. So I think you're so right that obviously the technical skills come into it. But you heard him say, he hired somebody because they were willing to say, I don't know, but I want to learn. So that curiosity, which is a soft skill, really got him the job.
100%, 100%. There's a book I read, I don't know if you've read it, Amelia, it's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Have you heard of it?
I have heard of it, but I have not read it.
Yeah, so it's like written in the 1920s, but it literally reads like it was written yesterday. It's really impressive. For anyone that's sort of interested in soft skills and managing conflict and really wants to better themselves, we hear so much about, watch this film because it's a really good film, or learn this software, which we will come on to, I'm sure. But how do you be a good, successful human at humaning? Mm-hmm. And that would be my recommendation as a book, because it really goes through how to manage situations, and it's not dry. It sincerely stresses about being sincere. It's not just about how do you butter someone up. It's like, how do you genuinely convey that you care, and how do you manage situations really well? So I would, for anyone that wants to really get ahead, I would genuinely recommend reading How to Win Friends and Influence People. I can't remember who it's by, but there's only one book called that, so that would be my suggestion. Do you have any suggestions, Amelia?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I think one really essential element of working together with people is having a level of self-awareness. That's kind of really what Richard was talking about with this guy. And there's a really cool tool for self-awareness called Johari's Window, which you can read about online. And then it's a little exercise that you do. So Johari is spelled Johari. And it's a really cool tool. You kind of fill in a little box. And it's just a tool for working on your own self-awareness, thinking about where your blind spots are, thinking about what you don't yet know about yourself. So what are your kind of unplumbed depths that might offer some really exciting things for you? And how much you share with other people. So it's a really cool tool. I recommend doing a little reading on Johari's Window if you want to work on self-awareness.
That sounds super cool. So there you go. Those are our tips. We do have a question, though. We do have a question from one of our listeners. This is from Jack, who's from Windsor. And Jack wants to know what visual effects software he could be learning to sort of put him ahead in VFX. So very thematic for this episode. The answer is all of them. I'm joking. Yeah.
Every single one.
I know that. Yeah. I know that Nuke, I think, is still like really high end and popular, because After Effects is generally like a gateway drug. It's like a way into visual effects, because it's sort of like Photoshop but for video. But then I know it sort of gets into Nuke, which is the sort of highest end compositing software. But then I think having a principled understanding of what compositing is, making sure that the program is node based. So even Fusion, I think you can download a free version of Fusion. That's by Blackmagic. And but then understanding node based compositing, but then also giving yourself a broad understanding of 3D, including modeling and animation. And you can do that in any software, because ultimately once you learn the skills and you get good at what you do, you can then quite quickly sort of jump to another application. Obviously one of them is always going to be your favorite, but in terms of that, you've got Maya. Blender is actually probably a best shout because it's free, and some of the stuff that people are creating in Blender is just unbelievable. It's very, very impressive. Or 3ds Max, That's Dan's technical answer.
So lots of options. I mean, what you're demonstrating is there's lots of options. And find the free one first, right? Don't spend money until you really love it. 100%.
And genuinely, check out the community around Blender. I'm sure you've already heard of it, but getting good at that will make you good at the other ones. And then learning to composite in Nuke is then what I'd recommend as well. But yeah, so those are my thoughts. Those are my thoughts. Do send your questions into podcast@youngfilmacademy.co.uk. We love to read them. We love even more to answer them. And we hope that you have enjoyed the wisdom of Richard.
Yes, very much so. Thank you for listening.
That's when we need a jingle like, the wisdom of Richard.
Yeah, it's like the more you know, but we need like one that's not copyright infringement to say at the end of the show.
100%. No copyright infringement intended. Perfect. And on that bombshell, thank you and good night.
Thank you and good night.
What show is this? Oh my God. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.